At the beginning of 2009, Magnus Carlsen had defeated Viswanathan Anand for the first time in a classical game of chess, and that game proved to be a bit of a turning point in their personal encounters. In the next couple of serious games they played, well, Carlsen had no difficulties. Games were both drawn, but clearly the players were evening up in their strengths, and in fact, Carlsen was at this time, around 2010, higher rated than Anand. Certainly in blitz games and in rapid play games, Carlsen had a definite edge over Anand for the first time really in their encounters. As we can see from this game played in the Arctic Stars tournament in Kristiansand in Norway, it's a rapid play event played at the end of August 2010. This is the final, first game. Carlsen has the white pieces. We join the game after 31 moves. Anand has a very solid position. It's a kind of Slav type pawn structure you can see with the pawns here on b7 and c6. And there's this pawn chain here on the king's side, and Anand has a knight against bishop. We've seen that so often in their games. Carlsen is definitely better here. He has a space advantage. It's that pawn chain, that pawn on d4 that gives white space advantage in the middle of the board. But black is very solid, and it's hard for white to break through into black's position. But let's see what Carlsen managed to do here. He played h4. Now this is one of my favourite attacking methods, using the h-pawn. We're going to run that pawn up the board. Now it might be that at some moment white opens up the h-file and switches the rook across and somehow gets the queen in and gets a quick attack on the king. It might be that that pawn sits on h6 and can set up some kind of mating net. So it's slightly worrying for black when this move comes. Now the reason I like playing this kind of attack is with the h-pawn is that also it doesn't harm white's king in any way. White's king, even though this pawn is advanced, is still completely secure. So how do you defend against an advance like this? Do you let this pawn come up the board, and then how do you meet the how white is going to attack there? Well, Anand prefers security. He just blocked this pawn straight away with his own h-pawn. But of course this weakens the pawn on g6. How do you get to that pawn? Well, you open up the centre now. Anand waited, just protecting the pawn. I mean, he has quite a passive position. There's not too much he can do. So Carlsen opened things up. Now clearly that can't be taken with this one because the h-pawn is on prise. If it's recaptured this way, that opens up this diagonal and the e-file as well. It doesn't look too good. So Anand tried to hold things together with his knight. And now Carlsen switched to the e-file. Now Carlsen has several targets here. Obviously that pawn on e6, pawn on g6 has no pawn support, and the pawn on b7. So there's a lot that Carlsen can, where he can sort of poke and probe here. I really like queen b3, targeting two weak pawns simultaneously. And Carlsen defends the e-pawn, and that rook could be useful, swinging up to the fourth rank at some moment. So black has a lot to sort of hold on to in this position, a lot to take care of. It's not easy. And white can just poke and probe here. So, white's advantage is kind of permanent here. He can hold this advantage, a structural advantage. And here Anand makes a mistake. Probably he should have come back. Now remember, this is a rapid play game, so not easy to see, tactical things and hold everything together. But knight e7 would have allowed the rook to defend along the fifth rank here. Instead, Anand played rook a8, and this move was very strong indeed, looking to bring the rook over, opening up this diagonal, and after this, bishop takes pawn was a terrible shock for black. If this is taken, this is very nice actually. White can't move the rook in straight away because you can see black's rook is covering here, but queen h6 is a very delicate winning move. If the king comes this way, you play queen check, and you can see it's a double attack. This rook is going to drop. Or king g8 and queen g5 wins in the same way. Double attack here. The rook drops. So Anand has lost an important defensive pawn on the king side. And this still can't be taken, because in this case, well, yeah, first of all, we swing the rook across. That means it's not going to drop to a check here, and the knight has to block, and then we just take the rook. White is winning that position. So Anand played queen d5 check. Now he's evened up the pawns here, but this is still a dreadful position for black. It's all these different targets. All these pawns are still weak, not to mention black's king, which is looking more and more vulnerable as the pawns are disappearing from in front of it. So it's a very pleasant position for white, particularly as black has zero counterplay here. A very typical Carlsen position actually. h5, good move, just ripping away one of the pawns that protects the king. That'll allow the bishop, rook and queen to attack. Queen b2, this is a great move, and it's this idea of combining attacks on both sides of the board. So obviously attacking the b7 pawn, but also controlling this diagonal. If the queen comes back to defend the pawn, h6 is very strong, not only threatening a check here, but also the pawn can march forward as well. Very nasty. So Anand gave up this pawn, and maybe you could play h6 here, but well, it's a rapid play game. Carlsen kept it very clean and just grabbed this pawn. So now white is a pawn up and still has a raging attack against black's king, and it's just falling apart now. If the queen goes to e7, for example, well, simple trading is going to win here for white, and you have two extra pawns. So the king came up the board, and now this is very nasty indeed. You can see black's king is just in desperate trouble. And in this position, okay, there's going to be some horrible discovered attack and moving the rook in. And now a winning move for white, g4. Once the knight goes, then black's position falls apart. Anand played back to g7, but now g5 check was a winning move here. Anand resigned. If king takes, obviously the knight is on prise, and if queen takes, then rook g4 is a winning pin. The queen moves away and queen takes knight. Very nice victory from Carlsen, and very typical of the kind of Carlsen style that we've seen more and more of over the years. It reminds me a little bit of his game against Kamsky from the Sinkfield Cup a few weeks ago, where Carlsen managed to combine pressure on the queen side with breaking through on the king side. So that was in late August 2010, and Anand and Carlsen next met in the Grand Slam tournament in Bilbao, a classical game. You'll see in the next clip what happened there.